Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Wellbeing of Women Strategy Launch panel event. We are absolutely thrilled to have you join us today. What I think is going to be a memorable occasion and a fabulous discussion with three truly inspiring women. And I want to take time to thank them for giving us their time and their trust and their commitment to our charity. Now, just very briefly, who are we? So, Wellbeing of Women is the charity, the women's health charity that saves and changes lives of women, girls and babies. And what we want to try and do for this charity is make everyone to understand that women shouldn't be limited by their gynecological and reproductive health. They've got so much to offer, not just in terms of their well-being and health, but in every part of our society. Now, Wellbeing of Women has historically funded really vital research into women's health, literally from cradle to grave. But what we want to do now, as we relaunch our charity and share with you our plans for a new strategy, is to also think about normalising all aspects of women's health right across their life course. And we want everything we do to be powered by women's voices, what they need, not what doctors like me think that women should have. So we've called the panel event today From a Whisper to a Roar. And we want that whisper to become a roar because we're going to talk about tackling all the taboos in women's health. And when I say tackling taboos, there are an enormous number of them. And I just want to briefly outline why I think it's just such an important issue, not just for the girls and women's in your life and my life, but for all of society. So we know that women's health issues affect the quality of life and well-being throughout the whole life course. And my generation is going to be one of the first generations of women to live into their 8th and 9th decade. It's quite an extraordinary thing now. We know that menstrual periods are incredibly common because most women that you and I know have 12 of them every year for nearly 40 years of their life, and yet we don't talk about periods. It's really difficult for people to talk about having heavy periods, needing to go and see the doctor, perhaps they're not believed, it may take very many years to get to a gynaecologist, and yet I know, as an obstetrician and gynaecologist, that the commonest reason why women come and see me in outpatient is with period problems. So we must do something about this. And we know that about 1 in 6 or 7 women are going to suffer problems becoming pregnant, they're going to suffer subfertility or infertility problems. We know that when they become pregnant, at least 1 in 3 or 4 of them will suffer miscarriage. A fewer number will suffer the pain of repeated miscarriages and then stillbirth or other disasters in pregnancy. And we know now that there's an inevitability that every woman on this platform today is going to end up going through the menopause at one age or another. And we know as well that those women who are going through those menopausal years frequently contemplate leaving the workforce because they just don't work in places where there is the support needed to encourage them to stay. And we know as well that these are women at a time in their life when they are most experienced, most productive, and can give us so much to society. So I think it's very important as well, after this last 15 months of us all living through this extraordinary COVID-19 pandemic, that we've really tackled the taboos and the stigmas. And we look again with new eyes at the barriers that have been facing women and their successful access to healthcare. So I think I've laid out my stall and that I think we need to talk much more about these things. We need to tackle these taboos and tackle these stigmas. And just to remind everybody here that women represent 51% of the population. They represent 47% of our workforce, and they take on the vast majority of the unpaid caring activities in society. Whatever your feelings are, I hope that the men who have joined us too are keen to hear about what our panelists are going to talk to us about today. I just want to remind you that when we get things better for women, that everybody in society benefits. I think it was Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General formerly, who said, when we get it right for women, nations thrive and survive. So with that in mind, I'm absolutely delighted to have with me this panel of really inspirational women, so successful in their own fields, all outspoken about women's health. They've been chosen because they want to speak up and talk out about it. So let me start by introducing Dame Jessica Ennis-Hill. I think probably best known to our audience today as the face of the London 2012 Olympic Games and winner of the heptathlon gold at that same Games. What you may not know, of course, is that Jess is also an entrepreneur and a game changer for women's health and fitness. And in 2019, she founded Jennis, a femtech business that set out to change the face of women's training and to help make women more body literate. And Jennis is now providing programs that enable women to understand their unique hormonal cycle and how they can harness that cycle when they're doing their sports training to be stronger and healthier. And our second panelist today is Izzy Judd, professional musician, part of Britain's Got Talent semi-finalist string quartet, the fabulous Escala. And after a difficult path to parenthood, Izzy wrote Dare to Dream, a really beautiful and very honest and open account of her struggles with fertility, her experiences of IVF, which ultimately led to the birth of her daughter Lola. She's going to tell us a little bit more about her second child, and I think a third child that she's incubating currently. Izzy's going to continue to keep the conversation going around fertility, something else that people find very difficult to talk about. And she's keeping that going even when she's not on this platform with us today through her podcast, Let's Talk Fertility. And my third guest is Marissa Thomas, PricewaterhouseCoopers UK tax leader, and she's a member of PwC's UK Management Board. She has over 22 years of working for and with some of the UK's largest employers. And I just want to share with our audience that PwC have been such fantastic and long-term supporters of Wellbeing of Women. And so I've had the pleasure of meeting Marissa on many occasions in the past, and it's always a joy. Thank you, Marissa. You've championed our relationship. There's no doubt in my mind that you're as passionate an advocate of women's health as I am. And I know how hard that you've worked over those 22 years to promote gender diversity throughout the companies that you've been involved with, especially in senior leadership and board roles. So thank you to all three of you. So let's start this discussion and this fabulous panel event from a whisper to a roar. And I'm going to start, if I may, by suggesting that we talk about the extent to which women's lives are impacted by their gynaecological and reproductive health. And Jessica, I can start with you. As an elite athlete, how has your gynaecological health impacted on your life and your career?
Yeah, I suppose my first real experience of it was starting athletics as a young girl. I started athletics when I was 10, and as I went into my teen years and I, started with my menstrual cycle, my whole kind of world at that age changed. My hormones were kind of flying around. I had to make big decisions about education and sport. And at that stage within athletics and then within that sporting arena, my menstrual cycle and other athletes' menstrual cycles wasn't something that was ever really spoken about. We didn't sit down with our coach and have a conversation about when we were on our periods, how we felt, how it was affecting us training day to day. It was just something that we almost felt like we just had to go through and just experience and deal with, and then just carry on with our regular program and our prescribed way of training. And it was only until, I developed as an athlete, I got older, I got stronger, I understood my body more, that it kind of just really kind of blew my mind that we wouldn't have those conversations on a regular basis to just have that in-depth understanding as an athlete of how we were changing, but also for the support team around you, for the coaches, for the physios and nutritionists, for everyone to have that more rounded understanding and approach towards, us as females and how we, kind of have these roller coaster moments throughout our month. And then obviously in later life, I continued training and ended up having my son in 2014, which was an incredible time in my life, but also a real eye-opener for me. I had no understanding of how, my body was going to change physically, how I would change mentally, the physiological changes. And there was no one really around to kind of, you know, prepare me for that. You know, it was never spoken about pregnancy in the sporting world and coming back from having your first child and continuing to compete. So that was a real, you know, a really interesting time for me and a really turning point for me, where I just was able, fortunately, to understand my body in a way I'd never understood it. You know, the physical changes, the hormones that surge through your body through pregnancy, and how they have an effect on your ligaments and your tendons, and how that then has a knock-on effect to your explosive strength and how you perform on a day-to-day basis as an athlete. You know, it was a whole world of learning for me. And yeah, it's been a massive journey through sport, understanding my body and how those changes have impacted on me and my performances.
And Jessica, you speak so eloquently about it, and thank you for being so frank and honest with us. But was there anybody there to help you when you identify what this issue was? I mean, because, you know, historically we thought, well, you know, athletes peak and they do these wonderful things. They get their heptathlon, in your case, your heptathlon gold, sorry, and then they get pregnant and that's the end of it. So how did you manage to return to work and to training and to become once again, get back to that elite group?
It was a really challenging time, and it was an unknown time more than anything, because I had a fantastic team of people around me, but they'd never experienced trying to bring an athlete back after pregnancy and, you know, trying to reach those high heights again. And at that time, there was no clear structure within sport as to how you approach training and, you know, how you approach physio and how your nutrition is supported in that way. It was kind of like we had to just read as many research papers, kind of get ahead of the curve with what was out there already, and try and sift our way as a team through it together. Unfortunately, I had incredible people who were, you know, very passionate and very talented at what they did. So they were able to guide me and support me, you know, back into full training. But even now, you know, these conversations are still lagging behind. I still have athletes that, you know, approach me and want to speak to me about how I tackled my journey through pregnancy and coming back into elite sport, because there isn't that clear direction and that support within our sporting community to help women do that. So yeah, it was an interesting and very challenging time, but a time that I, you know, would not change in any way, and learned so much from it.
Thank you. And do you feel that women's health issues are still taboo in your world and in the world more generally?
Yeah, I do. I think that things are changing, and I do think we speak about them more. And there's amazing women like on the webinar today who, you know, are getting their voice heard and speaking about their own experiences. But for me, coming from a sporting world, I can see now that it's slowly beginning to become a priority, which is great. And then I think that gap between sport and everyday women needs to be bridged now. And I think we need to be able to communicate and educate and help as many women understand their bodies and these stages that they go through, because our hormones and, you know, our gynaecological health it underpins every stage of our lives as women. And, you know, the more understanding and the greater education around it is really powerful. So yeah, I think we are getting there, but there's still quite a lot of work to be done.
I mean, what do you think about the impact of COVID as well? I mean, I'm an incurable optimist, so I think that some good things for me in medicine, for example, have come out of the COVID pandemic. I mean, awful things as well, but, you know, brass the things that have gone well. Do you think that we're going to be able to be more, you know, persuade more young women and older women too, to do more exercise, trying to become more healthy, because they've seen what happens when individuals with medical morbidities catch this awful virus?
Yeah, I hope so. I think there's been, through this whole pandemic, there's been people who have perhaps gone the other way and not found exercise as a way to continue through this challenging time. But there has been a lot of people who have taken, you know, physical activity to another level that they perhaps might not have, you know, during this time that we've been through. And I think more than anything, I think the experience of exercising, the pleasure that it gives you, the you know, the kind of release of energy that it gives you that helps your mental health is huge. And I think the more we speak about it from a medical perspective and how exercise helps, you know, various illnesses that we face, our hormonal imbalances, all these different things that we face in life that can be challenging, exercise and having a program where you know how to train your body in a great way can have such a massive positive effect on how we feel as individuals.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And Izzy, tell us a little bit about your experience of having to navigate some of the stigmas and taboos.
Yeah, so my husband and I got married in 2012, and naturally you then expect, oh, well, we'll go on and we'll start a family. And it didn't happen. I was young, fit, healthy, as was my husband. I had absolutely no awareness of fertility issues or any education, and actually very little knowledge about my own body. But as I sort of went on the process, which was incredibly challenging emotionally and most of the time on my own, I felt quite, I don't know if it was that I was ashamed, I just didn't know how to talk about the fact that we were struggling. It was one of those things where it felt like everybody around you was able to get pregnant, and you spend your whole early years being told not to get pregnant, that you actually then have a complete lack of understanding of your cycle and how it's supposed to work and how your body and how each monthly cycle happens. So when I sort of rushed into, right, I need to fix this, and I went for medical help, and I was diagnosed with polycystic ovaries, but I never really felt like it told the whole picture. I didn't seem to have many of the symptoms of polycystic ovaries that typically go with it. But obviously I took the advice and went into a very sort of holistic approach of looking at my nutrition to try and help with the polycystic ovaries and keeping well, and generally trying to be as fit as I could be going into eventually fertility treatment. So my husband and I had IVF a few years later, after months of no periods. They just completely stopped. And I did fall pregnant, but sadly we did miscarry quite early on in that pregnancy, which was just devastating. And it felt, you know, you've gone through all of that and then that happened. And I suppose we were, both my husband and I, felt a bit naive about miscarriage as well, you know, not really understanding that that was also a very common experience, you know, of women and couples. So once I sort of got back on track, we did go on to conceive my daughter Lola. She was a frozen embryo, which still absolutely blows my mind that I saw her on the screen as an embryo before she was transferred back that day. And it's just, yeah, it was unbelievable. And but shortly after Lola, I then did conceive very quickly, naturally, which was a real shock because I wasn't expecting, obviously I'd struggled so much to have my daughter. But it made me start to think about my fertile cycle, my life, the journey, that actually, because my body was responding like that at one age, doesn't mean that as you progress through your 30s and beyond, that your body doesn't change and things don't shift and lifestyle impacts. And, you know, for me, after my son was born, my period stopped completely. And because of the polycystic ovary diagnosis, I believed, right, well, I need to look at my nutrition and my exercise. But actually, I went so much the other way that I began to undernourish myself, over-exercise, desperately trying to fix what I thought was my fault, my issue, that my body wasn't giving me monthly cycles. And then basically discovered that I had something called hypothalamic amenorrhea, which was I suppose, quite a long journey of discovery. It was 3 years really before I got a diagnosis, or before I had to do my own research. And I think that's the other thing with tackling these taboos and having these conversations, is because it's very difficult to get the information. And throughout my fertile cycle, it's been a case of trying to do my own research to put the jigsaw puzzle together. And I just really want for my daughter to be able to have the power of knowledge, to be able to help her understand her menstrual cycle and the importance of it, and how it as a woman, it's everything for us. So once I sort of sorted out my lifestyle a bit better, and I looked at my exercise as an enjoyable experience, not to try and be fitter or whatever, or what aesthetically or anything like that, but just for my general happiness, and food because I want to enjoy food. A month later, my period started, and we just conceived our 3rd child. So I've had a bit of a sort of journey of my fertility, and I think it's just something I'm really passionate to keep talking about, because for those people going through those struggles, they're not alone.
Yes, well, it's not just a journey, it's a bit of a roller coaster, isn't it, that you shared with us? And
Yes.
Thank you for your frankness and for being prepared to share. And I just wanted to touch briefly on your comment about miscarriage being so devastating. And I mean, many years ago, 30-something years ago, when I set up the recurrent miscarriage service at St Mary's, I remember talking to one of my first ever patients who came to that clinic, talking about how she'd had infertility in the past, and then miscarriages were, as she put it, just what you said, absolutely devastating. How could she have, in quotes, as she said to me, failed at the 2nd hurdle as well? So what are your thoughts about that? Who helped you through that, apart from your lovely other half and etc.? Who was able to help you with that? Because it is a very lonely place, miscarriage, isn't it? And often women don't know about it until they've had a miscarriage, and then they discover that people they know quite well have never talked about it, but they've had one too.
Yeah, and women are warriors, you know. They go back to work, they go back the same day, you know, they just plow on. And I think for me it was such a physical sensation to lose that baby, and I will never forget that feeling, and the sense of emptiness, and the sense that I hadn't even told anybody I was pregnant, and then I'd lost, and it was just so devastating. And I thought, what if now I'm not only struggling to conceive, what if I can't carry a baby? And all these things go through your head. You know, obviously Harry, my husband, was a huge rock and support, but he was going through his own grief. And you know, obviously I had my close family, but I still think about it. It doesn't leave you. It's a deeply emotional, well, for me anyway, experience. And yeah, I think it's again, it is something that is, I'm not alone. There's a lot of people that are experiencing that, and have to experience many before they get listened to.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Yes, and that's often what I hear from the women that I care for. You know, why do I have to experience this again before someone will do something? And understandably feel both angry and let down. Like, yeah. And Marissa, what do you see as the most pressing issues affecting women in the workplace? I mean, we've heard from Jessica about all of the menstrual problems that she had to try and sort out on her own. We've heard from Izzy so eloquently about her fertility journey and then the miscarriage thing. Now, wearing your employer hat, or what do you think are the most pressing issues that we've got to address if we're going to make it better for women in the workplace?
I think, Lesley, we need to address them all. You know, women experience, as we were discussing today, a multitude of different health experiences in their time working with one employer or many, whether that's endometriosis, whether it's fertility challenges or treatment, miscarriage, and also menopause, as we touched on earlier. I mean, we have 23,000 people work for us at PwC in the UK. 45% of those are women. we have a lot of women who every day are dealing with some very challenging health experiences. So I think as an employer, we have a huge responsibility to create the right environment for our female employees and our male employees as well, to allow the type of conversation that we're having today to happen more frequently, but also to put the right type of infrastructure to provide support and also policies in place as well. When I was preparing actually last week for the webinar with your team, I had 3 members of my team on with us, and every single one of us had experience to share around a really significant period during our working life under one of the headings I just set out, you know, whether it was miscarriage, whether it was fertility and menopause, all of us had experience to share. And we all talked about how we're much more comfortable sharing those type of experiences now, you know, leaning on each other for support and asking for support when we need to than we were a few years ago. So for me, that's real progress. But I think you have to focus on all of them. I mean, a lot of people stay with PwC for a long time, so we see a lot of people right through from the beginning, right through to the very end. And your point on menopause, and we certainly don't want women in their menopause to stop work. You know, we are very focused, as you know, Lesley, on gender diversity, and that's from the very top of the organisation all the way down to the less tenured. And therefore, we need to create an environment which means that women, when they do hit the menopause, don't leave the workplace.
Absolutely. And so important to encourage them. And as you say, the whole business about having to find out all this stuff on your own, I think, is the thing that I really want Wellbeing of Women to champion as well. Not, you know, I'm not suggesting we become a textbook, what I'm wanting, or even an internet resource, but to actually help women to access the information they need so that they can make the decisions that are best for them. Because, you know, we could have a conversation, I could have a conversation with Marissa or with Jessica or with Izzy this morning about a particular issue, and it isn't one size fits all. There are going to be different things that you need to think about. So I think it's absolutely imperative that we find ways to offer women really good evidence-based information with which they can make decisions, and also empower them to help themselves so that they are back in the driving seat. I think one of the things as a doctor that I see so often, the distress I see, is really, really fundamentally about no longer being in charge of what's happening to one's own life and needing to get back into that driving seat. So thank you for that. And what are the things that you think, Marissa, have changed most or helped you change the culture? Say, for example, PwC, because I think it's fair to say it's a bit of a success story at PwC, isn't it?
Yes, no, it is. And look, I think, you know, we certainly feel that we have a huge responsibility to put the right policies in place to support women that go through different healthy experiences and also create the right type of environment. Actually, there's lots of success stories I could talk about, Lesley. I'm not saying we're done, far from it, but we have achieved an awful lot. And Sarah Churchman, who I think you know well, and Laura Hinton, our people leader, have been real champions of policy change, but also creating this type of environment where these type of conversations go on every single day. Yeah. There's one policy change actually that we're about to announce that I can shout out today, which is our fertility treatment policy. We are going to allow our staff from the beginning of July to take up to 8 days off to invest in and focus on their fertility treatment. That we have never had that before. Yeah. And as someone actually who went through fertility treatment as a partner quite a few years ago now, 12 years, I was an ambitious partner, very focused on not letting anyone down as I went through the treatment, feeling like a bit of a failure because, you know, coming back to Izzy's point, because I needed the treatment, I didn't tell anyone at all. Yeah. I had all the treatment on the Saturdays and the Sundays. I was fortunate enough to have the resource to go private, so I could do that. I could select when I had the treatment and different interventions, but I carried on doing the job I was doing, working very long hours, leading on very large client assignments, and I did that without anyone knowing in the workplace I was doing it. And I'd really like to think I wouldn't need to do that now. In fact, I'm fairly sure I wouldn't. If I was going through that now, then I would be much more comfortable sharing with the people I work with day in, day out, that that's what I was going through. So they could understand maybe how my working pattern was adjusted, my mood, my health, my ability to be present sometimes. And I think that shift in 12 years, I think can't really be underestimated.
I quite agree, because although I still talk to women on a regular basis who are worried that their miscarriage or their fertility or their menopause problem is going to mean that people will not overlook them for promotion or criticize them as not being a team player at work. But it is getting less now. I think there are more. So thank you on behalf of, thank you to PwC for what you've done and to leading that field ahead. So let me turn now to sort of a more general points and come back to you, Izzy. Where do you think the conversation is currently? Do you think we're getting better at talking about it, and is the dialogue as open as we need it, or should we still be pushing forward to really tackle those taboos and get that whisper to become a roar?
I think social media, one of the positives of social media has been that it has allowed the whisper to get a bit louder. There have been more people sharing their experiences, and personally I've found a huge comfort from other women opening up to me and men about what experience they're going through. And I think that's one of the positives of social media, that you're sort of anonymous in the sense that you can talk and share and have a conversation that you might still not be able to have with friends. I think that's obviously everybody's experience is unique. Some people feel they need to talk, other people don't know how to have that conversation. And also family and friends don't know what to say. I think that's the other key point, is educating people that somebody might be struggling to have a family and being mindful about how you say something to somebody. And also not to be afraid to say to that friend, I don't know how to support you. How can I help you? I'm here if you want to talk. And I think that could be with a range of gynaecological issues that women are actually facing. You know, I talk to a lot of women with endometriosis, which is incredibly debilitating, and right through to even the perimenopause now, of wanting to know more information but not knowing where to get it from. But I do think even by having conversations like this today and starting to tackle taboos, we are getting better, but I think there's still lots we can do.
And you make a really good point about where do you go for the information, because I think, you know, the internet is a wonderful thing. It's full of stuff, but I worry sometimes that some of it isn't always accurate. A lot of it isn't evidence-based. So I think resources and, if you like, safe places to go where women and men can log in and think, well, we know that we'll get the truth here. We know that we'll get practical help here. I think that's really important. Thank you, Izzy. Thank you so much. And Jessica, what about your thoughts about where are we currently in relation to women's health, and what do you think, where have we got to do the pushing from your perspective?
Yeah, I completely agree with Izzy. I think that having, you know, that platform of social media, the negatives that it brings, but that great positive of being able to open that conversation is huge, and being able to share those experiences with a large group of people is so helpful. But for me, I just over the past few months really understood the gender data gap and how that's still so huge, and the amount of research that's put into so many different areas, but unfortunately into women's health and into our hormones and understanding, you know, our periods on a better level, or the perimenopause or menopause. The research just hasn't been done to that high level, that quality research that's been done in other areas for male issues, for example. And if we don't have that great research, then it then becomes very confusing for practitioners and for, you know, support people out there who are trying to guide women in the right direction, without them being bombarded with, like you say, all the information that is out there that often isn't that accurate. So for me, it's about, having that research and being able to have funds and money invested into those really key areas that can make a real big difference to so many women's lives.
Thank you. And I mean, that's a perfect opportunity. And I didn't plant that question as to be giving a shout out for Wellbeing of Women, because it is the charity that researches groundbreaking healthcare innovations and changes. And I very much hope that everybody who's joined us today will come to us and support both funding the research and also helping us to provide educational tools and be really good advocates for women like the three of you who've had these extraordinary journeys and been so generous to come and share them with us today. So Marissa, can I turn to you again, and what role you feel that employers can play in helping to reshape how we see and talk about women's health? And I'm trying to not be distracted by the chat, but there's a couple of things, several people congratulating you on what you've achieved at PwC and asking, how did you get the buy-in at the top to make it more female friendly? So a couple of questions there. So you pick whichever bit of it you want and go for it.
Well, I certainly can't take credit for all of those successes at PwC myself, to be clear, Lesley and everyone watching. Actually, it's not been hard to get buy-in at the top of the organisation. Partly, I think because we're an organisation that is very, very focused on looking after our employees. And actually, we have some very, very strong corporate values, which we really do live day in, day out. And one of those is care. Yeah. And this, to me, it shows care more than many other things we do. But there's also a commercial imperative. Yeah. We are focused on gender diversity, actually diversity more broadly, but gender diversity, you know, for this particular discussion, that there is a business benefit in gender diversity. You know, we have more diverse, we have greater gender diversity in our workforce. We have a more positive impact on our clients. We make a greater return. So you take that commercial imperative and our values together. Actually, any time we make a policy change or look to not change our culture, but evolve it, so these type of conversations and the type of sharing we're talking about today become more commonplace, we get no resistance at all at the leadership level, at the top of the organisation and further down. So hopefully people can take a lot of comfort from that, because I'm sure we're not the only organisation where that is the case. In terms of employers' responsibility, I mean, some people watching today will know about the Edelman Trust Barometer. I mean, employers are the most trusted institution in most people's lives. So we have a responsibility to have the right policies in place and create the type of environment. And actually, I'm going to pick on a point that Izzy talked about, actually be really open with everyone that you can be involved in these type of discussions without knowing any of the answers and without having any really direct personal experience. Though I would say from my own conversations, nearly everyone has some direct personal experience, whether it's themselves or through another partner or through a partner. But I think really encouraging people to listen more and actually use all the resources that are created by employers such as ours. And we're not the only one that does this, whether it's our menopause toolkit that supports women that are premenopause or going through menopause in terms of how you manage symptoms at work, the type of treatment you should and should not think about. We've got talking forums that anyone can join, that where people that are going through menopause or fertility treatment are sharing experience. So I think employers really need to create those type of environments and do so in a way that people trust them, coming back to the point about the Edelman Index. And I'd encourage everyone to engage with that and then think about the role they can play inside the organisations they work for on the back of that.
Yeah, you make a really important point that you don't have to have necessarily experienced all this to be part of the solution. You can be part of the solution. One of the things that I often say as well is we've got to make this everybody's business, because it's going to affect somebody that you know. So you can make a really big contribution. Even if you don't believe it today, you really, really, really can. So what needs to change and what can we do to get the conversation going? Jessica, what do you think that we should really be focusing on now?
I think, again, it goes back to understanding ourselves and that knowledge and that kind of experience. I think so often, and particularly through my experience of pregnancy, you don't really kind of have the information or the research until you're in that phase of your life. You know, once you get there, you're kind of really reactive and you want to research everything and get as much information about that phase that you're in. And I think that's part of the problem. We need to start that education piece from the very beginning. So young girls at school, there's a huge drop-off rate with girls that take part in sport around the age of 14 or 15. They don't want to do sport. They don't want to continue with sport because their bodies and their lives are changing so much hormonally. And I think if we can educate young girls, you know, around the importance of understanding their menstrual cycle and how they're going to change during that time, and also the effect that it has on sport and the effect that sport has on the hormones, is really, really powerful. And I think creating that relationship and that education piece at that age has a knock-on effect, you know, during every phase of their life as they grow up. And from a, you know, a biased sporting perspective, you know, creating really good relationships with exercise and, you know, not finding yourself in that phase where you suddenly hit 16, 17 and you want to exercise because you want to look good. You know, those relationships set up a really negative cycle in young girls' brains. And it's about, yeah, that education of how we, you know, understand our bodies, how we can gain as much knowledge before we hit these phases where we, you know, might respond in a very different reactive way. And I think for me, that's a huge, huge part of what we need to do and where we need to go.
Lovely. And not least of which, of course, that in trying to imbue those sort of values and beliefs and self-worth is so invaluable for those women who choose to go on and to have a pregnancy or pregnancies. Because if they can embark on that pregnancy fitter and healthier, the outcome for themselves and for their baby and their future babies is going to be so greatly improved. So it's a really, really important point you make. Izzy, can I come back to you? Your thoughts and getting the conversation going. And what would you like just to, you know, Wellbeing of Women to be offering to you and to your friends and colleagues?
I think if we're thinking about fertility as a subject, there are so many people that are going through an unexplained fertility diagnosis. And now treatments have been going on for quite some time. And obviously it is an industry, isn't it? And I'm wondering why we're not getting a few more answers to do with unexplained infertility. And I know that's something I get asked a lot, and how difficult it is to sit in that diagnosis. If you are told what the issue is, you can understand that. But if you're in a place of complete unknown, and slightly going back to my not quite being sure of my diagnosis, and actually thinking about a doctor looking at me as a person and going, what is your life like? How stressed are you? Are you, you know, I've always had anxiety. It's part of my endocrinological system to just be flooded with adrenaline and all the rest of it, which has an impact on hormones. And actually really sit down and understand the person and look at, you know, I know obviously there are statistics and all the rest of it, but every body and every female body is unique. And we have to start to understand better what's right for us, because my BMI might mean, oh no, she's not underweight, but actually for me, I might be. So I think it's having more understanding of, more education, more understanding of ourselves. And yeah, I'd love to see that sort of area of unexplained, you know, more research going into fertility.
So I think you've just given us a plug to our listeners that we need to fund more research into fertility and other really vital aspects of women's health. And I hope with that plug that we will have achieved some of that. Lovely, thank you. And Marissa, how can employers and managers and colleagues, particularly men, be better friends and allies?
I think it comes back to Jess's point around education again, actually. There's, and look, we've had some great messages coming up on the chat when we've been having this discussion, sharing different sources of information that would help all of us understand better what we go through and what others go through. And those resources, I'm sure, are available to men as well, Lesley. But I'd say from an employer perspective, I think just accepting we're probably never going to be fully done. We're going to have to keep encouraging the type of debate we've had today, creating the type of resources. We learn more, and people face different challenges, and make sure that we don't underestimate how hard it is to create the type of inclusive environment where people feel safe to talk, to have the type of conversation we're having today. And you don't create that, then it sustains. You have to maintain it. So look, I mean, there'll be people working who have leadership roles or work in large organizations who are watching. Very happy to, if anyone wants to get in touch at any point, to share the journey we've had at PwC, and actually what we're focused on over the coming 5, 10, 20 years.
Thank you. So, I mean, there's a very clear message, and I absolutely endorse it, is there is no room for complacency, is it? No room at all. And once you've achieved something in the workplace or in your own lives, then you can't just take it for granted. You've got to keep on working at it to hang on to it. I think that's a really, really important point. And what about the importance of bringing men into the conversation? Jessica, Izzy, got a comment about that?
I think it's hugely important, because like you said at the beginning of this conversation, it's that understanding, isn't it? And it's not just for us as women to understand our bodies. You know, we have to have that control element, and whether it comes to understanding our menstrual cycle or fertility or whatever it might be, that's not something that we should just go through alone. You know, we have amazing husbands and partners and people who are there to support us, and if they have a more rounded understanding of what we are going through as women and how our bodies are changing and how that impacts on our, you know, emotions or our moods or our energy levels, then that can only be a really positive thing for, you know, just for that more rounded approach to understand us as individuals. So yeah, I think it's hugely important.
Yeah. Izzy, a last comment?
Yeah, I think the conversation around fertility, it's been hard enough with women being able to open up. It's incredibly difficult for men to talk about it. With my podcast, I find it very difficult to find men who will share their stories, their experiences. But equally, there's a lot of men looking for that support, because usually with fertility, the question goes to the woman. You know, it's not the man. And actually, this is totally a combined experience. And there are factors coming from both. You know, it's important to look at, as I say again, you know, the individuals and the couples as a whole. So I think, you know, trying to encourage men to talk. But also, I totally agree, Jess, with your comment about men understanding their partner's monthly cycle and their reason why they might be more motivated at one part in the month, and they might be completely drained at another time and completely raging at another moment. And if they understand where you are in that cycle, and perhaps to understand with their children's cycle as well, it helps benefit everybody, I think.
Yeah, I would just piggyback on the back of what you just said. I think that's so important. I, like, you have a daughter, and I think about when she starts her periods, and my understanding is obviously going to be great, but I want my husband to have that great understanding so that he feels comfortable having those conversations. And that's something that will stay with her and create a really good line of communication, you know, for the rest of her life. I think it's so important.
Yeah, and the other thing I was just going to share as well with in terms of educating our children is we're now in a society where children are coming into the world from all different, from donor, from same-sex, from there's so many things and topics that we need to be open about and sharing with our children about, so that they have the knowledge and understanding and the education behind that as well.
Yeah, because as I started right at the beginning of this conversation by saying, you know, almost every woman that you and I know, and by you and I'm talking to everybody on this platform today, you're going to have periods very regularly for nearly 40 years of their life. And that's an awful lot of events that are perfectly normal and that they need to be able to communicate about. I think everyone on this platform today is going to join me and say thank you to our amazing speakers. You've been so generous with your thoughts and your very personal experiences and journeys. And it's been a real pleasure for me to be able to welcome you and to talk to you. And thank you so much for doing that. I'm going to now, if I may, say a few words as we come towards the end of this lovely hour about the Wellbeing of Women, the charity. I'm going to share my screen, if I may, but please don't go away. I promise you that I won't kill you with death by PowerPoint, as they say. And I'm just going to just remind you a little bit about what we're here to do today, as well as having a conversation with three quite extraordinarily inspiring women. We're also here to launch Wellbeing of Women's new strategy. And I think what you'll agree with me is that you've heard about real challenges, real life challenges by real women who've joined us at different stages of their lives, with different backgrounds, with different needs, and that each one of the experiences that Jess and Izzy and Marissa have had and shared with us were things that are happening to many other women. They're not rare conditions or problems. They're actually very natural occurrences. Women are going to continue having about 12 periods a year for 40 years of their life, and about 4 out of 5 women will want to become pregnant and have families. Some will be able to have successful pregnancies, others will not. All of them need our help. They all need education and information with which they can do the very best for themselves and their own situation. And then there's an inevitability, as I started off at the beginning by saying, is that they're going to get to the menopausal years. I often say to policymakers when I'm trying to change things that I'm the first generation of woman who's going to spend longer as a menopausal woman than I was reproductive. And that's a function of how we all live so much longer now, and we all have so much healthier lives. I'm very lucky, and I'm not planning to live forever, but I do want to live as well as I possibly can for all those postmenopausal years, and not become frail and dependent. So I think there's an enormous amount we can do in that world as well. And I think it's really important that we think about the fact that the places we work often, and even our homes and the people who we're closest to, aren't really equipped with the information and the language or even the empathy to help make the best of those lives for what is always going to be someone's mother, sister, daughter, granddaughter, best friend, or whatever. So what are we going to do about it, and what can we do about it? So I started off by saying that Wellbeing of Women is the women's health charity, which is literally saving and changing the lives of women, girls and babies in our society. And of course, you must remember that the work that we do here in the UK is often rolled out to global benefit. Research always, often in this field, is applicable to women all over the world from many different backgrounds. So what do we want? We want to ensure that women's lives are not limited by their gynaecological and reproductive health, and that they really can play an enormously important role in all sorts of other things as well. To date, we've funded amazing research into many stages of women's lives across the life course. As some of you will know, when I was a very junior trainee back in the 1980s, it was Wellbeing of Women, albeit with a different name then, who funded my initial work into miscarriage. And I somewhat resonated with Izzy when she was talking about looking at that embryo on the screen. I remember working with the Embryo and Gamete Research Group at the Medical Research Council when I was doing my miscarriage research. This was at the very beginning of IVF, when it really wasn't available at the NHS, and we did so much to try and make that happen. It's you know, we could do all sorts of things like that. Wellbeing of Women has helped draw the link between human papillomavirus and cervical cancer, so much so that this is a problem in the UK that has greatly reduced. Thanks to the work that Wellbeing did. And also research that's discovered the importance of folic acid and vitamin D in healthy fetal development, and also developing new tools and new methods for identifying which women in their menopausal years are going to be at greatest risk of osteoporosis. So our work has made great big changes in the medical world, but it takes a while to come through into medical practice and to change your life and my life. And all the while, we're trying to do these and trying to get them done faster. And so we wanted to look at ourselves and ask ourselves the question of how can we make a bigger impact? How can we improve your lives in a better way and more quickly too? And how are we going to achieve it? And who and what will guide us, and what are we going to do? As I promised, this is not going to be a long presentation, but I just wanted to share with you the fact that we wanted to build all of our work going forward on women's voices and what they need, not what doctors such as I think that women need. We want to hear from women and hear about what it is that they want from us. And we've listened, and we've listened hard to, and with the help of Sasha Nathan, who's been helping us with this new strategy, and his fantastic team at GenPact, we've run many focus groups and talked to many women about what it is that they would like. Women from all stages of life and women from all sorts of different backgrounds. And what we've heard from them is that they want their voices to shape their own future. So we're going to try and do that. And women also want to see change, and we want to focus on the impacts that matter to you. You've heard this morning from 3 fabulous women who had different needs and different wishes, and we need to hear what matters to you. And we want to particularly tackle the taboos and make it a norm. So what we're hoping to do now is to not just continue our wonderful groundbreaking work in funding research into women's health, but also to play an ever growing or ever increasing role in the importance of education, which so many of you have this morning mentioned in the chat, and so our 3 panelists have all referred to in different ways about how important it is to have high quality, evidence-based information to understand what you as a woman or a girl need. And I think that's absolutely crucial. And of course, I don't think we can do any of this without becoming really passionate advocates. I mean, advocacy is defined by different people in different ways. I've always thought it's the ability to get people to think about a problem and make them behave differently. And I think if we can talk about the importance of tackling these stigmas and taboos, we will make an enormous difference to the lives of all the girls and women we know, and as a result, improve their health. And we can't do it on our own either. We have to collaborate, we have to develop partnerships, we've got to stop being territorial about this little patch or that little patch. We've got to recognise that if we open our arms wide and we include everybody in the conversation, in the research, in the partnerships going forward, that we're going to achieve so much more. I've often said that you can travel a lot longer, a lot faster, and a lot farther if you don't mind who gets the credit along the way. And I think it's really important that we welcome every partner who wants to collaborate with us so that we can try and get to this goal as quickly as we possibly can. So how are we going to achieve it? Well, I think we're going to now start launching some campaigns, and I'm not committing us necessarily to a campaign about the menopause, but it can't have escaped many people's attention that there's been an enormous amount talked about the menopause in our media and social media platforms recently. I think that's possibly because it's been such a taboo, silent area in the past, and people are starting to wake up, as our panelists were saying, and Marissa in particular, talking about the need for this. And so we're going to reach out to you now and ask you to help us shape not just this campaign, but other campaigns in the future that will really make a difference. So we really want to be able to say, find ways of measuring the impact we're having on your lives and the lives of the women around you. So there are 3 ways that you can support us. And I know that this is an ambitious program, and I know that we're going to need a lot of commitment and an awful lot of individuals to help us to do this. But I think these are the 3 ways that you can support. We really, really want you to engage with us in all sorts of different ways. We really want you to join with us in forming an education platform and a resource that really is second to none, and which really, really changes the lives of girls and women and their families around them. We want you to follow us on social media and shape the future of women's health, and we want you to come to the many webinars that we're going to be producing with your help and including you, and bring your friends and your loved ones along with us, so that we can all be better informed and that we can all learn from each other, and we can all benefit as a result. And yes, I'm going to say it, we want you to donate as well. We're going to donate to the campaigns that women's voices that we've reached out to are going to help us to shaping campaigns so that together we can save and we can change lives. So we're going to use women's voices to help us shape our campaigns, help us shape the direction of well-being of women going forward. And that, of course, will allow us to undertake even more cutting-edge research that is going to be really important for women from cradle to grave. I'm going to finish there, and I'm going to I'm going to stop sharing my screen and come back to my fabulous panelists. And I want to thank you really from the bottom of my heart on behalf of Wellbeing of Women for being with us today. Dame Jessica Ennis-Hill, Izzy Judd, Marissa Thomas. Thank you to the Wellbeing of Women team who've worked tirelessly and put up with my incredible impatience to try and get us moved around and focusing on the things that we've all agreed are really, really important. The research accompanied by the education, accompanied by the advocacy. And again, my thanks to Sasha Nathan and his team for being so generous with their time in helping us to formulate a strategy that we're all very proud of and hope that you will want to come and join us with. And I hope that this will be the first of many, many occasions when we meet like this on a platform and we just spend our time talking about what we can do to improve women's health now and in the future. So with that, I'm going to thank you all. And once again, thank you again to our fabulous panelists. I look forward to meeting with you again, ensuring that you are our long-term ambassadors, because you've obviously got so much to offer Wellbeing of Women. And thank you again to the Wellbeing of Women team. It is now 1 o'clock and we mustn't use webinar time. So I'm going to wish you all a very happy day and thank you once more for coming to support us. I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Bye-bye.